Hey everybody, welcome to Module 8. In session 8.1, we're going to take a look at the if function and also structured references in formulas. In 8.2, we're going to talk about nesting, which we already discussed in class and you've probably seen in formulas up until now. We're also going to take a look at VLOOKUP. We already went through that. We're going to go through it again, as well as HLOOKUP and if error. And then finally, in 8.3, we're going to talk about using conditional formatting and use COUNTIF, SUMIF, and AVERAGEIF, which again we've already discussed in class, but we'll go a little more in depth into those formulas and take a look at them. Before we start, let's take a look at the if formula. So for example, let's say we have a number like 95, okay? And we have our letter grades like A, B, C, and D. Okay, so you get an A if you get over 80. You get a B if you get over a 70. You get a C if you get over a 60. And you get a D if you get over a 50. If you get below 49, then you get an F. Something like that. Okay, so this doesn't work perfectly, but that's the idea. So when we have our grade that comes in, we want to write an if statement. Now, this is just going to be one level. We're going to say if this number is greater than 80, then give it an A, right? We've already done this with if statements. So we basically have two choices. Yes, it's bigger and it gets an A, or no, it's not bigger and it goes to our next option. Our next option in a nested if statement is going to be the B if statement. So this will be another if statement and it's going to say, is 95 larger than 70? And we'll keep on going, right? It actually would work better if this was like a 25, right? Because 25 would say it's not A, then we'll go to B. If it's yes, B, then give it a B. Otherwise, go and check for C. And it just keeps on going, right? So either yes, it is the right number, or it's not. And through this, we can create a filter, and this is how a nested if statement works. A statement which is not nested basically just stops at this point, right? So we would have, let's say, a question that we want to evaluate, is the number in the box larger or smaller? And we would write true or false, right? So we'd have it print out true for this one, false for that one. But where we have multiple conditions, we have to use a nested if statement. So basically, we're always choosing between one or the other. Or we could match data. So let's take a look at this module's example, and we'll go through the table that's in the book, right? You could read about it on page 463, the background of it. And we're going to do the working with logical functions, figure 8.1 on page 466. So the first thing we want to do is add a new column, okay? So we do that. Actually, I skipped a page. The first thing we want to do, never mind that, is they're saying that they froze the top row here, but they didn't freeze the first columns. So they say that we should go to C2 over here, and then go to View Freeze Panes. And now you'll notice that the top is frozen, but also the right hand is frozen. So if you scroll over, we'll still be able to see the last name and the employee ID. Okay, so take careful note of what it says on page 467. And it talks about the difference between just having regular data and a table. Like we've seen in previous modules, a table has unstructured data, so we're able to, let's say, build in a filter. The data doesn't get erased, it doesn't disappear, it's still in there, but we are able to quickly filter it and look at different data. So now we're going to go through the if function. Okay, and you could read about that on page 467 or 468. And the little intro that we had at the beginning basically shows you what it is, and you've probably used it before in previous modules. Okay, so we're going to be working off of the data table sheet over here, and we're looking at this cell, E16, which has birthday this month, number 4. Basically, that means that the birthday is in April, right? So let's go back to employee data, and now we're going to do the yellow box on page 469. Okay, and the first thing we're going to type in is birthday month. Now you'll notice that when I type it in like this, it looks like regular data, but when I hit enter, it actually adds it onto the table and it gives me an extra row. Now, the interesting thing is that you could put formulas inside the table that will only apply to that cell, but if we put it right at the top, we can make a formula that will apply to the entire row, like we're going to see next. So we're going to go into K2, that's right here, and it says we're going to go to formulas and insert function. Okay, and we're going to go to if and hit OK. So this gives us the three parts of the if statement. The first is our logical test. The second is what happens if it's true. The third is what happens if it's false. So let's type in month bracket F2. Okay, so the month in cell F2, which is birth date. So we're separating out the month from this date, equals. So is it true that it equals? And now let's type in data table. So it's going to go down to the data tables sheet. And which cell is it going to grab there? It's going to use E. Oops, sorry about that. It's going to use E $16. Now the reason why we have the dollar signs is because E16 is never going to change. F2, however, will change depending on what cells we're looking at in column K and in column F on the employee data sheet. So now we go to value if true, and we're going to type in yes. And value if false, we're going to type in just the two brackets. So basically, we looked at this before when we looked at a nested if statement in if when we did VLOOKUP. Basically what's going to happen is it's going to grab the birth date month and it's going to look if it matches 4 from the data tables for April. If it is, then it's going to say yes, the person's birthday is this month. Otherwise, it's going to leave it blank. So let's hit OK and let's see if it worked. Right, so there we go. It says birth date 4/20. And that's why it said yes. This one is 4/11. That's why it said yes. So it automatically applied the formula to write down. And you'll notice that if we go down to if month 57, because this doesn't have a 4, instead it's a 5, it's not going to say yes. So there we see really quickly we added the table, we applied the if formula, and we basically compared from another page that cell. We could have easily had the same thing on this cell as well. But because this is a table which we could then filter, we wanted the formula to be able to run in the entire table. So I'll give you an example. Let's say we filtered this. We'll go filter by number, greater than, let's actually change it less than 3. Okay, so now we filter the table. We have less rows in here because these are only people who have worked for less than 3 years. But we still have our formula running on the side. It got applied to the entire column. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is the AND function. So before, we had a structure that looked at, is this true or false? This is our logical statement. And we had one of two options, right? And this is basically what an if statement is. Okay, so basically we say, is this true in the if statement? And either yes or no. And then we have nested if statements to keep on going. Okay, but in our example, we have something a little bit different. So the AND statement has a number of conditions. Okay, and then all of these together have one of two outcomes. Either it's true or it's false. Okay, so this is what AND does. So for example, if we have 4, 5, and 6, and we say, is 4 greater than 2? That is right. Is 5 greater than 2? That's right. Is 6 smaller than 2? That's incorrect. So the whole thing would go to the incorrect side. Right? If all 3 were true, then it would go to the correct or yes side, and we'd make something happen if that was true. So basically, it takes as many pieces as we want, evaluates all of them to make sure that they're all false or they're all true. Sorry, that they're all true or at least one of them is false, and then that would fail. Okay, so that's what we're going to do next. Okay, so we're going to continue working through module 8.1, and we'll take a look at the yellow box on page 473. You could read more about the AND function on pages 470 to 472. Okay, so the first thing we're going to type in is eligible whoop, that's not right. Okay, so we type in eligible for comp day. Right away, this becomes part of our table. Okay, so it says autofit. I'll just do it manually. Next, it says make sure L2 is active. Again, we have to do the first cell to copy the formula automatically. Otherwise, we could have different formulas in these cells, but they won't all be the same. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, we'll go to insert function, and we have if, we press OK. Okay, so the first thing we do our logical test. We're going to type in and then we'll put in I2 equals PT in brackets, comma, our second logical argument is going to be E2 is greater than or equals to 2. And we'll close that. Next, we'll write yes, and then we'll just put in a blank, and the blank will show up as blank. Okay, so we're going to press OK, and then here we'll have yes. So now what's happening is that I11, which is our job status, so if we go down to I11 says part-time. So that's one condition. The other one is E11 is greater than or equal than 2. So E11 is years of service, and it is greater than 2. So in this case, the only way that you can be eligible for a comp day is if you are both part-time and the number of years worked is greater than 2. Okay, otherwise you're not eligible for the comp day. Okay, so now let's take a brief look at the blue box on page 474 with the dated if function. So you'll see that this column here for age, column G, uses a formula that says equals dated if F2, and F2 is their date of birth, comma data table E17, Y. So what happens is, let's go take a look at data tables E17. So that's down here. E17 is age as of this date. We could, for example, put in today, and it would show us the difference between today and their date of birth, right? And this would update all the time. But right now, all of these numbers are fixed. These ages aren't going to change because they're all being run off of January 1st, 2017. The idea here on this sheet is that we'd update this date every year, and based on that year, this is how old they are. Even if their birthday happens, they won't automatically age. They'll age the next year when we change that date. Okay, so we're basically saying that from this date in F3, based on the starting date, give us back, and the Y stands for years. If we put in M or D, we get the month and or the date. So right now, the only thing that's returned is the year, which gives us a number. In this case, this person's 25 years old. Okay, next we're going to take a look at the OR function. The OR function that you could read about on page 475 and 476 works a little like the AND function. AND function makes sure that all the pieces are the same. Here, the OR function returns true if any of the logical conditions are true, and it returns false if they're all false. Okay, so it's a little bit backwards than AND. And they all have to be true, and if only one of them or more is false, then it returns a false. But with OR, it returns true if any of them are true. So if anything is true, it returns true even if the rest of them are false. But it returns false if all of them are false. Okay, so next it's really critical to read the using structured references to create formulas in Excel tables on 477. This is important because remember that when we're in a table, we're running the table off of this name, employee table, And we could reference that using formulas that don't necessarily relate to the actual cell because we're able to filter the data and so on. Okay, so take a look at those. And now let's do the example on page 478 and 479 to look at an example with if, and, or. Okay, so here we're going to go to M1 and we're going to type in salary increase. I'll hit enter and it will add itself to the table. Okay, so we go to M2 and we're going to go back to formulas and insert function. And we're going to grab if, which is the first one up here, and press OK. Okay, so our logical test has both square brackets and rounded brackets. Okay, which is very important to have the right way. So let's give it a try. Or, okay, so we typed in or store equals Bonham or store equals Graham. So we get both of those. Okay, we'll go back into our dialog box. So now we'll put in the value of true, which is the current salary times 0.035. So basically with everything entered, here we have or if the person works at Bonham or they work at Graham, then if it's true, they get 0.035% increase in salary. Otherwise, they get a 0.025% increase in salary. Let's hit OK, see what happens. So there we go. We get the salary increase for all the employees, depending on if they work at Bonham or if they work at Graham. Otherwise, they get the lower rate of pay. Okay, so then we'll go and we'll change all this to accounting and stretch it out so we can see how much it is. There we go. Okay, so let's go and take a look at this formula. It says if the store is Bonham or Graham, if either one of those, then make the salary 0.035%. And this is a condition if true in the if statement. If it's false, then they get a 0.025% increase if they were at any other store. Okay, that's the end of session 8.1. I hope you learned a bunch about the advanced functions that we could use with if, and, or. Next, we're going to look at lookup tables and if error.